dumping it in the bin after these guys, call it.
Yeah, I mean, I do need to change the oil today.
Okay.
So
yeah.
Take a fryer,
That'd be
picture
awesome.
of
Yeah.
dumping the oil into the container.
Or just draining it out, whatever. I'll be in there. Just knock on the door or something. I'll have headphones on.
Okay.
All right.
I guess. Yeah.
Sounds good.
Now, just out of my own curiosity, we have done a little bit of research, but I feel like Lindsay probably did the most, and she's not here.
Right.
So, whenever you guys are dumping the oil, what happens to the oil after that? Like, what processes go through?
Like, so any given restaurant like this one, their staff would, dump the oil into our container, and then we provide a service to right now about 200 restaurants, and some of those are hospitals and retirement homes and churches and whoever has oil, essentially. And what happens is that when they change out their fryers, we provide a container, and then they put the oil in that container. We have it all broken up by areas. So we have 9 different routes that we run.
Okay.
And so most of those are on 8-week cycles. So we'll come by every 2 months and pick up the oil from all the accounts that we have in a certain region.
Okay.
It all goes into our vacuum truck. We have a 2,000-gallon vacuum truck. And at that point, there's the main feedstock for biodiesel is any kind of lipid, so any kind of fat or oil. So it doesn't matter if they fried some chicken in there, or there's some bacon fat, or it's canola or peanut or soy or whatever. It can all go into the process to make biodiesel. So then, when we pick it up from restaurants, there's still, I guess, contaminants. So there's food particles and water. Those are the main things. So after that, the oil needs to be filtered and dewatered. That's how they describe it.
It needs to be filtered what?
Filtered and dewatered.
And dewatered, okay.
That can be done with gravity or heat, centrifuge. There's several different ways.
Okay.
Excuse me. In the early days of Diesel Green Fuels, it was set up as a co-op, and it was a non-profit, and it was essentially a group that got together that wanted to learn how to make biodiesel. And so they built a small reactor and made us, did kind of community fuel making once a week, and people would come out. I wasn't here then. I've worked for Diesel Green for a little over a year, but this company started in 2006 for this project, or whatever you want to call it. Because it originally started out in a different form than it takes today. It's kind of...
Yeah, I'm going to get this closer to you, just in case we're getting more trucks than we are your voice.
All right. So at this point, this business Diesel Green Fuels has never done any commercial biodiesel production. We essentially act like a feedstock company, so that means we have accounts and we have a steady supply of oil coming in. And so we sell it all to biodiesel, so we're essentially a biodiesel feedstock company. And then we work with a biodiesel plant near Dallas, Pacific Biofuels of Texas. Pacific Biodiesel of Texas.
Come on, guys. Hi.
Howdy.
Y'all working on the film? Is that what I hear?
Well, just
Well, the camera guy wasn't able to find a good enough camera,
Oh,
so
okay.
we're still working on the story.
Oh, okay.
But the
Right
film
on.
won't happen today, or
Go
probably
on.
at all. But we're going to get pictures and stuff to get the good
Okay, cool.
visual effect. So.
Right on. Well, we will be around if you need us for
It's
anything.
an
Thank you.
awesome
Appreciate it.
dog. It's huge.
That's cool.
Okay. So anyway, they work for the company in Dallas?
Yep, we work with a biodiesel production company, and so we bring them all of the fats and oils and everything we pick up out of the containers, chicken bones and whatever, and they do the filtering and dewatering, prepare for the biodiesel reaction. Essentially, what we're doing when we make biodiesel is
This is the third one to our group.
Hi, I'm Brittany.
I'm Caleb.
Hi, nice to meet you.
What we're doing, we couldn't get the camera, so if you just want to like record on your phone, and we're just gonna kind of get whatever we can out of all of our recordings. If something doesn't come through, it'll show on the other.
Okay.
So
That's fine.
okay. Sorry about that.
That's okay.
You're talking about like audio record or video?
Audio.
Audio. Okay.
And we'll get pictures throughout the day.
Okay.
All right, so
Or throughout the time.
essentially the process of making biodiesel is about changing alcohols. And it's called trans-esterification, which just means literally to swap alcohols.
Wait, trans what?
Ester, like E-S-T-E-R,
Uh-huh.
trans-esterification.
Vacation.
Uh-huh.
Okay. And that's just changing the alcohols.
That's essentially what it means.
Okay.
It's very similar to making soap.
Oh, I really hate these. Okay.
Except in the biodiesel process, we use a lighter alcohol, and we use a catalyst. And instead of any kind of oil or fat, you have a heavy alcohol, glycerin or glycerol. And they typically have 3 fatty acid chains. So what we want to do is cut off each fatty acid chain and attach it to a lighter alcohol.
Okay.
And then that's what biodiesel is. It's a monoalkyl ester by definition. Typically in the industry they use methanol. It's lighter and doesn't take water out of the atmosphere as much as something like ethanol, or it's not as expensive as butanol, or you could make it out of any of these alcohols, but methanol is traditionally what's used.
So once the biodiesel fuel is made, do you guys just transport it and transfer it to all these different gas stations, or what do y'all do with that?
We have a fuel delivery truck. We have a separate truck, a 2,000-gallon truck, that we go and pick up the finished fuel. And then right now we have 3 retail stations. And so we deliver to all those. And then we also provide fuel to several fleets. So like a landscaping company or a recycling company or whatever it is.
Okay.
So in those cases, we go and we set up a pump and a tank on their site, and then we can come by and fill it up with fuel, and they're able to fuel all their equipment up.
Okay. Cool.
So we have about 8 fleets that we provide fuel to, and a couple of like ranches and farms.
So I know that with gas prices being as expensive as they are, is this able to decrease that at all, or how is that working?
We strive to. This particular model in biodiesel is different than the industry at large. Most biodiesel plants are huge. Average size is maybe 30 to 50 million gallons per year. Some of the plants in the U.S. are like 100 million gallons per year, whereas the plant that we work with makes a few 100,000 gallons per year, probably less than 1 million.
Okay.
So it's very small scale, and it's with us it's more about region. We're doing it in a local setting,
Right.
in a community setting. So we do try to work to kind of stave off fluctuation in the larger commodity market. We're able to do that by having control of the feedstock, by having these relationships with restaurants and people in the community that recycle their grease with us. But there's still too many factors. We can't be an island. It's all still connected in. But that being said, we've only changed our price 3 times in the past 2 years.
Okay.
So we don't change price every day like most gas stations do. If you look at the commodity index pricing for biodiesel, it's almost always higher than diesel fuel. It's typically more expensive. Like I said, we try to keep our price pretty stable, and so we may hold at one price for 8 months, and diesel fuel goes up. It gets higher than biodiesel, it gets lower than biodiesel. It kind of jumps all around, and we stay the same. And so it depends on when you ask. Sometimes it's cheaper, sometimes it's more expensive. But the people who use it, there's a number of different reasons why. Some people would rather give any amount of money to a local business rather than giving their money to the larger oil industries, and kind of continuing that lobbying and policy directive and things like that. They kind of keep us in this petroleum trap. So there are some people that like just spending their money locally and would rather support a local business. Some people do it for the environmental benefits. Some people do it because they don't want to be dependent on nationalized countries that are kind of maybe extorting the resources of the the people that are living
Right.
in pretty dire circumstances and things like that. So there's a lot of different reasons that people might want to use biodiesel, and then some people buy biodiesel when it's cheaper than petroleum, and at no other time. Some people will buy biodiesel if it's $12 a gallon.
So where are y'all at right now?
The price just went up. It's an interesting time in biodiesel because of some mandates that the EPA has put into place over the last few years. There's something called the Renewable Fueling Standard. We're on the second one now, and so it kind of outlines the mandates for how much of each type of renewable fuel is to be included in the whole stream of fuel. So it's almost it's not really a percentage. It's a given amount. And there are these secondary credits, kind of like renewable energy credits. If you guys have ever heard of RECs, it's something that's traded. Like for instance, if somebody has a wind farm and they make a bunch of wind power, they can sell that energy, but they can also sell the renewable credits, kind of like negative carbon. It's just it's an idea, it's a representation of these things, but there's an actual market for it. Like Whole Foods buys all the credits to offset all their energy from wind. So other companies do this or whatever. There's one in the biofuels world called RINs, or Renewable Identification Number. That's all it stands for. And these were initially set up around 2007 as kind of a way to give more. It's the same thing that they wanted to do in the renewable energy world. Typically it's going to be more expensive to start out small and use this technology and try to compete with the status quo, these huge companies or whatever it is. And so kind of something to help keep the cost down or get the technology to a place where it can be competitive. But then the EPA decided to adopt these, the RINs, as a way to be able to track their mandates that they set in place. And so they did that by requiring petroleum importers and refiners to purchase a certain amount of RINs based on their production levels. It's all getting very complicated. So this year, just a few weeks ago, the mandate for 2011 was reached. And so the secondary market, which can represent anywhere from $1 to $2 a gallon, completely went down. So for the rest of this year, and any fuel that's produced for the rest of this year, it's most likely going to be a lot more expensive, just because that secondary market isn't there to cushion the price.
Right. Yeah.
So, a long way of saying it.
Wow.
But essentially the mandates are finished for 2011, and so our price went up about 25 cents. It didn't go up $1 or $2, thankfully. We sell wholesale right now at $4 a gallon delivered, so that's typically bulk, like 500 gallons or more. And then at the retail station, the main retail station is at a place called EcoWise, just off South Congress in Austin. And their current price is $4.35 a gallon for biodiesel.
Okay. So, you guys, do y'all have like a general range of people that buy this fuel, or is it like very sporadic? Just everybody can. I mean, I know everybody can go and get it, but like, do you have a general specific? Like, is it mainly companies, or is it just like regular people? Or how does that work?
If you look at the volumes of fuel, about 50% of the fuel usage comes from these fleets that we provide fuel to. There's a pallet recycling company, and then two other kind of general recycling and composting companies. There's two landscaping companies that we sell to.
Okay.
And then we also provide fuel to Willie Nelson, so we take fuel out to his ranch.
Nice.
He's a part owner in the biodiesel plant that makes our fuel, and they're not a distributor. So we're the only company that really distributes from there. So they have to kind of go through us if he wants the fuel that came from his plant. But, so that's about half, and then the other half would probably be on the retail side, and so that's a lot more difficult for us to track. It's something that we've been working on is having a better relationship and knowing who our customers are, because we act more like a wholesale company. We're not there at the register when they come to buy the fuel. Right. They rarely ever see us. There's not a huge diesel green sign at EcoWise, Um, it's something that we'll be putting more focus on the next year. The company has been kind of operating in a bare bones capacity for a few years now. With the downturn of the market, it was, in hindsight, it was really smart for the owner to focus mainly on the restaurant relationships initially.
It's a really good idea.
'Cause it turns out that it turned out that a lot of biodiesel companies didn't really plan on the feedstock piece as much. They said, "Oh, these numbers look great. I can buy soybean oil for this price and make biodiesel and sell it for this price, and that'll be good forever." But the markets got crazy, financial ruin and all this stuff over the last few years, and so a lot of companies went out of business. And what I see is a lot of the smaller companies surviving that had built that network up and had that infrastructure already in place. And because we don't produce fuel, it doesn't require a lot. Essentially, we have a truck yard. So we park our 2 trucks, and we have containers like the one here, and barrels and things like that we bring to restaurants, and then tanks and things that we'll supply for fleets or new retail. We're setting up more retail stations right now. So it's really minimal overhead is the model for this particular business. For much of the last few years, there's only been one employee, other than the owner and kind of some admin help from people in the family and stuff like that. I came on as the operations manager a little over a year ago and kind of took that single person role for a little while, but there's too much work to do it all. And it really, growth and being able to do things like connecting more with your user base and having a stronger, like building your brand and having a better online presence and things like that. It's hard to do when you're in a truck,
Yeah.
a lot of the time, or kind of taking on too much. There's just not enough time in a day. So at this point, we have a full-time driver and a full-time accounts manager. We created that position. She's also kind of charged with growing the company, getting new accounts. And she's also doing some work on branding, which is kind of goes hand in hand with talking to new restaurants and things like that. You want to be able to have that brand. And we have an accountant and an admin person. So right now we have 5 employees. So the company has grown quite a bit in the last year, employee-wise.
So, but you're still the operations manager? Okay. I guess just to go back to basics sort of thing, how did the whole idea for this whole organization spark?
Jason Burrows is the owner, sole owner now of Diesel Green Fuels. Him and 2 other individuals got interested in biodiesel around the end of 2005 and wanted to find out, where is it available? Can I get any? And when it wasn't available, they started to seek out other resources and found kind of information online about making it kind of on the home scale, backyard scale. I think what happened was Jason wanted he wanted a more efficient car, and he was thinking about buying a Prius. This was back when they were really popular and everything was on a waiting list or whatever. So he ended up renting one for a weekend, and he drove it around. He said, this gets maybe, I thought it would get better fuel economy, and I'm still just burning gasoline, and there's so many rare materials that make up this battery and the carbon balance. Am I ever even going to be able to displace that? And so we started doing research and found out that you could get better fuel economy out of a modern diesel, like a Volkswagen Golf, for instance, gets about 55 miles to the gallon. He said, and it can run on a fuel can be made from, something local that's in the waste stream.
Yeah,
and
so
so
cleaner.
Mm-hmm. And so that's kind of how he got interested. Is the Prius wasn't quite doing it for him. He was looking for an alternative fuel or vehicle that made sense.
And then, where did this whole organization start? Like, what was its first little project?
They put together like a kind of a DIY biodiesel processor, and they started making fuel every week. Of course, that was maybe 30 gallons a week, and at 10 participants, everybody getting 3 gallons apiece doesn't really get you very far. So they looked into where they could get biodiesel and started collecting more oil. I don't think it was altogether intentional to become a biodiesel feedstock company, but it was really smart as far as being in this industry. It really paid off to kind of go after that first.
Yeah. So essentially, for a little while, they were making their own fuel for themselves.
A little bit, not commercial. There's a lot more red tape involved in
Yeah.
making and selling fuel.
Right, but like they could make their own fuel at home and drive with that.
And use it, yeah.
That's awesome.
Could you explain how a biodiesel processor works?
Yeah, I was talking about that earlier. Essentially, it's just a swapping of alcohols. So we take the water and kind of particulate matter out of the oil, and we put it in a tank and heat it up to usually between 100 and 130 degrees Fahrenheit, which is not that high. And then we kind of set the recipe based on how broken down the oil is. So we do a titration to find out the amount of free fatty acids that have already broken off, and then that's able to tell us how much catalyst we need to use. And so then we mix up the catalyst and methanol and kind of put all that together. And usually it's just a pump kind of recirculating.
Okay.
There's other ways to do mixing. There's a bunch of different technologies on how to do it, but that's essentially, it's heat, time, and agitation.
How long does it normally take?
It depends. Those three things actually kind of act like a triangle, and so
Okay.
if you have more of one, you need less of another one. Does that make sense? If you
Yeah.
have, not heat, because at like 147, you hit the boiling point of methanol, and you don't want to boil it off. It needs to be in there to replace the heavy alcohols. So for instance, if you don't have as much heat, if it's only like 80 degrees, then you probably need more time. And if you have more agitation, like better mixing, then that will decrease the amount of time. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So they all have kind of give. And then you could do it as a multiple stage reaction. There are also continuous flow processors that just use an extremely large amount of agitation and pressure. So it really depends. Like on the home scale though, you'd expect start to finish 3 days on a
Okay.
batch. So some of that's doing the initial reaction. All the heavy alcohols fall to the bottom, so you can drain them out of the bottom. That's glycerol. And then from there, you typically it's about cleaning up the fuel so it meets quality standards. And so that might involve using water or using their various filter medias that you can pass it through. Some people use wood chips. They make specific ion exchange resins, which is the same thing a Brita filter is. Brita filters have an ion exchange resin, and they're in a packed column. It's the same idea. So like I said, there's several ways that you can go about making the fuel, but typically it's going to take about 3 days start to finish. You don't have to be there the whole time. It's kind of like do this for 15 minutes and then let it sit for 8 hours.
Okay.
Let it settle out or do whatever else.
Yeah.
Do whatever else.
How different is this fuel that y'all are making from the mainstream fuel that's out there? Is it any different?
Yeah, it's different. To answer it technically, there's
I want to
AS.
speak out because of the motorcycle.
All right.
The motorcycle's gone. Sorry.
said no.
There we go.
There's a group that's made up of consumers and businesses and government called ASTM, which is an organization that sets standards for a lot of different things. So, like for instance, there's a specific ASTM standard for cardboard boxes. It's like they have to meet these qualifications. And then, so they make one. So there's an ASTM standard that defines diesel fuel, number 2 diesel, or ultra low sulfur diesel, what we'd buy if we were buying petroleum fuel at the pump. And that's D975. And then there's a specific metric for biodiesel that's different. It's a different material. And that's D6751. And so it defines exactly what qualities the fuel has to have in order to be considered biodiesel and legal for on-road sale in the U.S.
Yeah. Okay.
So there's very technical things that actually like describe exactly what it is. The just at the usership level, the things that are different about biodiesel, it's a lot more lubricitous. Over the last 2 decades, the standards keep coming down for the amount of sulfur that they'll allow in petroleum diesel, which is the main lubricant. So they went to low sulfur diesel in the 90s, and then ultra low sulfur diesel after I think it was like 2002 or 4, which actually caused a lot of issues with fuel injection pumps, which are mostly designed to be lubricated by the fuel itself. So biodiesel, even at a low blend, I should mention that you can blend biodiesel and regular diesel at any percentage. They just mix right together. And so even at a low blend, like 2%, it restores all the lubricity that low sulfur diesel had to what we have now. So anyway, there's, obviously at 100% it would be a lot more lubricity.
Sorry.
So that's one aspect that's kind of better for the life of the fuel injection pump. It has slightly less BTUs per gallon, so there's slightly less energy in biodiesel. It depends on what you make it out of. There's more in saturated fats like chicken or coconut, and less in unsaturated fats like canola or flaxseed or something like that. They don't use flax in the biodiesel industry, but it is a polyunsaturated oil. It also has a higher cetane number, so that means that a larger percentage of that energy gets turned into usable energy when it burns. So even though it has less kind of potential energy, it has a similar amount of kinetic energy. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Right.
Not very good at science, but I think I remember what those are. So.
All right. So it's different. So diesel fuel is flammable and toxic, and biodiesel is not considered flammable or combustible because of the flash point. Flash point is a measure of the vapors that are above a liquid and what temperature those will ignite. And so the flash point for biodiesel is up around 350 degrees Fahrenheit, so it's really high. That means that we don't have to have any kind of hazmat certification to drive it around in a truck. I can drive around any amount of it. It's also biodegradable and non-toxic.
Wow. So it's just completely safer all the way around.
So you're saying like if you got in a wreck and you were using that, your car like wouldn't blow up or catch on fire?
I mean,
It got really hot.
if you've got a hot fire,
Yeah.
biodiesel will burn.
Yeah.
But if it's just a lot of the spark or the other things that people are normally worried about with
Okay.
petroleum fuels,
Yeah.
it's not usually an issue.
So if you were smoking at a biodiesel gas station, you probably wouldn't.
No, it's fine.
Yeah.
I do it all the time.
Wow. How much better is it for your car besides that fact?
For the car itself, it's a tricky question because not all engines are created the same way. And so there's with older engines, there's material compatibility issues. When they used to use natural rubber as fuel lines, it's not compatible with biodiesel. Biodiesel is a solvent, so it starts to break those fuel lines down. They get mushy and eventually leak. So that's typically on vehicles manufactured before 1994. So it's not a huge amount of the stuff on the road or whatever,
Right,
but
more.
if you look at, is this going to be good for my vehicle? You drive a late 80s, Ford truck or whatever. It would be probably wise to change out those rubber components before you start using fuel. Some people just kind of start using it and replace it as it goes. But and then with newer vehicles, after 2008, there was an EPA requirement for emissions reductions. And so they started using these devices on all diesels in the U.S. called diesel particulate filters, which is just a filter on the exhaust that catches, or it does what it sounds like. And not the filter itself, but the regeneration cycle of the filter is not, say it's not biodiesel compatible. Most of the engine manufacturers just got lazy when it came to building out. This is very complicated. All right, I'm going to explain it quickly. So, so essentially they bring fuel to the filter during the regeneration cycle, and it just burns hotter to allow all the particulates to become smaller and pass through. To achieve this, some of the companies have put an extra fuel injection nozzle at the diesel particulate filter, or DPF, and most didn't. Most rely on just the computer to tell the fuel injection pump to send an extra squirt of fuel at the exhaust stroke So diesel engines have 4 strokes. The last stroke, it kind of pushes everything out and it goes through the exhaust. And so it sprays this extra fuel, and the idea is that it'll essentially turn into vapor and travel all the way down to the filter and burn up there, which is wishful thinking, I guess. It's really just laziness, and well, biodiesel is like I said, it's not as volatile. It has a much higher flash point, so not all of that fuel vaporizes. So during this cycle, some of the biodiesel comes down into the engine oil, and so you start to see engine oil dilution, and so vehicles after 2008 are kind of still a point of concern. There's a lot of people doing testing and seeing which vehicles are more appropriate. So it's an interesting evolution as we look at the diesel engine becoming more and more evolving closer to the parameters of petroleum diesel fuel and further away from that of biodiesel. But the diesel engine is a pretty remarkable thing. It's the combustion-based ignition instead of a spark means that you don't have to have a fuel that's flammable. Like ships out on the ocean are just huge diesels, and they're able to burn anything. They can burn motor oil and the really low distillate stuff from the refining process from petroleum, or basically anything that has any kind of energy. It's like it doesn't care what it is. And Rudolf Diesel he was actually commissioned by the French government to build some of his engines in 1900 for the World's Fair in Paris. They had farming colonies in Africa that weren't able to have access to fuel. These were peanut farms, and so the French government said, can you make an engine that runs on peanut oil? So there were 6 of these at the World's Fair in 1900, engines running on vegetable oil.
Yeah.
So this is not a new concept as far as
Right.
as using vegetable oil as a fuel. In biodiesel, we're just kind of following that evolution of it. We started out with an engine that can burn vegetable oil. It kind of followed the path of petroleum, like just this mid-distillate petroleum product. It had nothing to do with Rudolf Diesel himself. His name's on it somehow, though. He was all about his engine being used he really saw the potential for his invention to be used in the agricultural sector and for farmers to be able to grow their own fuel. And he kind of had that vision. So after his death in 1913, the whole industry kind of just shifted into petroleum and the design of the motors and engines and systems. And so biodiesel is just kind of a throwback technology. How do we use this material that was already a good fuel and turn it into a fuel that can work in these engines that have been geared more towards petroleum?
Okay.
So you asked me why is biodiesel better in your car? Maybe it's definitely better in your community. You know, when you look at the emissions profile and just the idea of keeping your money local. I think those are really strong values that some people have. As far as the car itself, it's kind of different. It varies depending on what type of vehicle it is, but
Well, like I know, for instance, like in my car, if you use like too much gas, it's not clean enough for your car. It'll mess up your fuel line and your fuel pump and stuff like that. I was wondering if there's sort of any change if I were to use something like your kind of fuel.
Like I mentioned, the older vehicles,
Yeah.
you'd want to change the fuel lines, and even my car, I have an 84 Mercedes, and I didn't do anything to it when I started running biodiesel. I started using it. So some of my fuel lines, like I said, it is older than 94 or whatever, but Mercedes actually use pretty good quality material.
Right.
But 35 years later, anything is going to start to break down. That's also kind of a point in biodiesel. No fuel is perfect. No engine is perfect. There's always going to be issues with vehicles. Some engines exasperate, kind of bring out are affected differently by the fuel. So it really depends as far as that stuff goes.
Well, would you say like an ideal year for your car for this kind of fuel would be somewhere in the mid-90s to like 2000s kind of? Just because the material seems to work better with it?
Yeah, I mean, as far as passenger cars go, all you have to choose from in the U.S. is Volkswagen and Mercedes, really.
Okay.
Which is everywhere around the world. There are so many more diesel engines, and even U.S. automated. Like you can go to Europe and buy a Ford Focus diesel, but we don't have them here. So U.S. auto manufacturers, because that's what the market dictates over there. The U.S. had a different relationship with diesel. was actually the Detroit kind of in the 80s saw the rest of the world moving towards diesels, and took some of their gasoline engines and tried to modify them to diesel, and they were smoky and they ran horribly and like broke down a lot and just weren't good cars. And so in the U.S. there was kind of a consensus or this general idea that emerged about diesels being like really dirty, and people wanted the EPA to put better standards on the amount of diesels that can come into the country or be sold each year. The EPA did not have jurisdiction for trucks and everything else, so larger vehicles, and so everything you see that's really big is diesel.
Right.
And they've gone through that evolution, and a lot of them are foreign. But even U.S. auto manufacturers finally came around and realized the potential for the diesel engine as a much more efficient engine than a gasoline engine. But we still don't have access to them in the U.S. really.
Do you see that
cases.
changing anytime soon?
Not really. And especially now that there are new standards as far as the particulate filters. They're good technology. Diesel particulate emissions are the number 2 cause of asthma in most places in the U.S. Right behind coal-fired power plants. So cleaning up diesel emissions is definitely important, whether people are using petroleum or biodiesel. It works for either one. But it's kind of like I wish more auto manufacturers would come around and actually install a proper way to clean the filters out. So if there was more of a focus towards that, I could see it. But as far as folks in the industry like me, I don't really have a desire to see a bunch of engines that are not really that are coming into the market that aren't ready for biodiesel like their counterparts from a few years ago are. So I don't know. That's just more opinion, but I don't expect to see a huge amount of new diesels. Some companies like Honda's been talking about it for a number of years. They just released their third generation diesel engine in Europe. I just read an article yesterday. But I doubt that we'll see the diesel Accord in the U.S. Ever, maybe. There are also a lot of there's a big hole in the mid-sized truck arena. You jump from there were some tiny diesel trucks in the 80s, like Volkswagen and Chevy and Isuzu, just like really small trucks, and then there's like F-350s, like giant dualies and bigger, and so the whole middle section is missing. Toyota has been making these mid-sized diesel trucks. They're like a number 1 seller all over the world. Like our military uses them, and all these countries have so many of them, just like workhorses out there. They get like 50 miles to the gallon. But we aren't able to import them into the U.S. I think there's one place in San Antonio that can get these Toyota engines. They have to be chopped in half, all this stuff. And he rebuilds them. So anyway, there's a lot of crazy politics as far as engine manufacturers and the diesel market in the U.S.
Factors.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I've been asking a bunch of them. I still have a lot more, but I want to give them a turn.
My part was only about how the fuel was made. You pretty
Mhm.
much answered it though.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Pretty much knocked my part out too.
Yeah.
At the very beginning, so that was cool.
Okay.
I guess that's me. Basically, are you involved in any community events, festivals type things?
We work with one generator company that does event power.
Okay.
And we supply fuel to them. When I was talking about not having enough time in a day, we're just really opening ourselves up to the ability to have enough time to say, oh, okay, we're going to go out to this event and set up a table or a booth,
Yeah.
or kind of have a presence, or do something like that. So I would like to see more of that happening. But it tends to be more that companies that we provide fuel to are involved in the events more than we are directly, as it stands today. I'd like to move more into event power and have some generators that run on V100. But it's not something that's happening today. We go to things like energy fairs and different other random events that come up throughout the year. South by Southwest Eco and stuff like that.
Awesome. Appreciate it.
Oh, okay. I guess I'm up
What else
again.
you got?
Okay. Well, these are all of Lindsay's questions. Just trying to figure out how many we've actually answered. So you said that you were the operations manager. How long? Okay, and you've been doing this for
About 6 years.
6 years? Oh, okay.
Not for Diesel Green the whole time.
Okay. So
I've just worked for Diesel Green Fuels for about a year. Started last August.
Okay. And what got you started at Diesel Green? Like, how did you hear about it?
At Diesel Green, let's see. I met the owner early on. The first biodiesel conference I went to in 2008. I met him there, and so I've kind of been following what's been going on in Austin with Diesel Green since then. I was out in North Carolina at the time,
Okay.
and so just kind of catching up at conferences, asking how things are going. In 2009, I drove out here to buy some equipment from Diesel Green.
Okay.
And kind of checked it out then, and
Yeah.
and then a friend of mine that I worked with out in North Carolina has continued to do consulting with this company. She would, or the owner would fly her out to train a new driver, or kind of, if there's a bunch of work that needs to get done and there's not really anybody here that can do it, he would bring her out and she would run around,
Kind of fill
a
in.
crazy lady. But I kept in good contact with her, and when they were kind of at it's kind of a crossroads for the business last summer, and they didn't. The driver was wanting to retire. I guess he's an older guy, but he doesn't have to work. Like his wife, I guess, is set up enough. But he came back on in January. She said he was just sitting around too much. So he's like, "Can I have a job back?" So anyway, let's see.
So if you've been doing this line of work for so long, you really enjoy it then?
I like it, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Had to make
There's,
sure.
there's so many different things you can do in biodiesel. Like, really, my specialties are design, production, quality control, which has nothing to do with my job here.
Oh.
We don't produce any fuel. We don't, we don't sell biodiesel plants. Quality, like making sure that fuel quality is good, is important. I can talk to our biodiesel plant, the people in their lab, and be able to communicate about if they're having problems, or if they're not able to meet certain specifications or whatever. It's helpful, but it's not really something that I do. So anyway, I do enjoy it, some aspects more than others.
Yeah, of course. So now I can't remember. You said that there was obviously one place where you all make this biodiesel here. Now, is there more?
There's we don't make any biodiesel in Austin.
Oh. Where do
It
we-
all happens at Pacific Biodiesel of Texas, which is
Okay.
up close to Dallas.
Oh yeah. Okay, but there's no other places.
That make biodiesel.
Well, that y'all do. That y'all have any other locations.
Green Diesel takes all their fuel to Dallas, not anywhere else, basically.
Right. Our options are really limited. We would probably have sought out another biodiesel plant. They call it tolling in the industry. Like, you supply the oil, and you're essentially just paying them to turn it into fuel, and then you own the finished product. So we've been looking for other tolling opportunities. Texas is weird as far as the regulations go. There are these, you have to have a rendering license, which is mostly about like the meat industry.
Yeah.
So your biodiesel plant ends up having a lot of the same specs as a meat packing plant. Because the laws are just not all that specific towards biodiesel, they just kind of threw it into the category of rendered meats
It's interesting.
and fats. Yeah. So it's really weird in Texas, but that means that there aren't that many biodiesel plants that have a rendering license. A biodiesel plant can buy like virgin soybean oil from the Midwest, or chicken fat from a processing plant that's already been rendered. But if they wanted to bring in some used cooking oil from the place down the street and settle it in a container, they have to go through this lengthy process and get all these certifications and licenses, which is really weird. It's
Yeah.
like, I know, it's very odd. It's like your bench has to be this far from the lockers, and you have to put your drain in this place, and you have to have smoke containment large enough for 2 semi trucks, and
So they
it just
just
goes
make it
on
really
and on and on. Yeah, there's a lot of red tape.
Wow.
But so really, there's not a lot of options for us as a company.
Just because there's not a lot of people that do it. in Texas.
There's not a lot of places that have a rendering license. Like we have a rendering license, a kind that's just a hauler's license. So technically, when we go around with our truck, if we pick up the oil here, it has to go directly to a rendering facility, which can be any business in Texas that has a rendering license. But if we wanted to like empty the truck out into a barrel in the yard, that would be illegal. Like we can't even use gravity to clean the oil up, which is all it takes actually.
Yeah.
It's just time, gravity.
Well.
So there's not a lot of options, is
Yeah.
essentially the answer.
But does that help? Does that help y'all's business in a way though? Because that just means that if people want this kind of fuel, they have to go to you. There's really not a whole lot of options.
There have been other companies that sold biodiesel in the Austin market, but you have kind of a completely different faction of like larger industry biodiesel, which still kind of continues a lot of the same. It's better. The metrics are better than using petroleum, but it's nowhere near as sustainable as the kind of small scale community biodiesel. The benefits of not having to travel as far and coming from the waste stream and so on, and so you end up the people that become customers that are long-term customers tend to do it because of that model more than just biodiesel itself. They would rather buy local sustainable biodiesel and don't really have that much interest in virgin soybean oil biodiesel or chicken fat stuff or palm oil from Malaysia or whatever. So it's kind of a quirky group of people that really want to do it. You have to want to use biodiesel because sometimes it's like going out of your way.
Yeah.
You're traveling and trying to find this pump that's like it was listed on the internet 3 years ago and
Wow.
it may not even still be there.
How common are the pumps? Like, are they everywhere? Or are they only like specific parts?
Biodiesel in the U.S. is mostly considered a blend, just a diesel fuel additive. And so
Okay.
20% biodiesel is typically the highest blend level you'll find at a retail pump in the
Okay,
U.S.
so you won't find them at retail pumps.
It's only in certain places, really.
Oh, okay.
So they, when they talk about biodiesel, they use that number, or just with a B in front, it means the percentage blend. So B20 is 20% biodiesel and 80% petroleum diesel.
Do you know like which pumps around here in Austin?
But Austin used to have more biodiesel pumps than any city in the country in 2006. December of that year, there was the TCEQ put some laws into place regarding biodiesel based on shoddy test data that they got because they decided to run their own test on biodiesel emissions and got different results than any other agency, the National Biodiesel Board or CARB, which is the main kind of state environmental regulatory agency that most states look to out in California, or the National Renewable Energy Lab, or any of these kind of groups that are well respected, put out good data. They kind of went their own way, got different data, decided to put a bunch of laws in place as a result of that, and basically squashed the industry in Texas. And so from 2000, so we went from having the most pumps in the country to you had to pay a lot of money and buy special additives if you wanted to distribute biodiesel or blend. If you wanted to blend, it was all about blending biodiesel. So every company that was carrying biodiesel at the time stopped doing it, except for Diesel Green. And the way we got around that was by selling the fuel as a motor vehicle fuel and not as a diesel fuel additive. So because we were selling 100% biodiesel, it didn't have all this red tape attached to it. And so we've had the only biodiesel available in Austin for the past 6 years, just at one location.
All right.
So
So you guys get all the traffic.
yeah, I mean, it's still compared to other cities, there's a lot of room for growth in biodiesel in Austin. So it's kind of been like different communities have adapted to it. So if you go up to Seattle, you can get biodiesel in a lot of places. Or if you're in Berkeley, there's these women that have a co-op out there that have been doing it since like '99. So, and they have a ton of customers out there. They have a 40,000 gallon tank that they have filled regularly. So many people are coming through. And where I was in North Carolina, there are over a dozen B100 pumps in the state. In Texas, there's 2. Oh. Well, so right now we have 3. We set up one at Real Ale in Blanco at the brewery. And there's one at a shop that works just on Volkswagen diesels south of Austin. But that's mostly just for the customers of that shop. People don't usually go there as a gas station. And then the third location, the only real retail spot is at EcoWise. And then there's one in Houston that's operated by another company. And then we're setting up a biodiesel pump in Dallas right now.
Okay.
So
That'll be convenient because the whole plant is right there too. So.
yeah, won't be too far from there.
Now, in your opinion, do you feel that if you guys were to advertise, that would help y'all out more, or would you?
If we don't make that much money on the biodiesel side. 80% of the revenue comes from the oil side of the business.
Okay.
And so our main focus would be advertising to restaurant owners.
Right. To get more of them.
To get more accounts, yeah.
Okay.
And kind of, I guess call it direct marketing, really. Just going in and talking to restaurants or setting up meetings with owners.
Are y'all working on doing that a lot more right now, or?
Yeah, that's Patricia is the accounts manager, and she's been doing work in that department.
Okay, and I don't remember. There is a list of the restaurants on the website that y'all work with, right? Okay.
Yeah, I don't think it's an updated list.
Okay.
But
There's a lot of it.
Yeah, we'll just take a few probably.
Okay.
For example.
And how do you get the restaurants to do it? Is it strictly volunteer, just restaurants that support the cause?
essentially, it's a really weird market, or it's so yeah. There different restaurants want to do it for different reasons. People that get it are like, this is a no-brainer. Of course, we want to work with you. They sign a service agreement with us. We provide a container and a free service, and then we also try to provide value in co-branding and through social media.
Okay, so you do not buy any of the oil from them. And do y'all? Sorry, you're fine. Do y'all like cut them deals? Like, let's say they want to use your biodiesel, would y'all give them like 10% discounts or something?
We
like
would.
that?
I don't think we have anyone that is a restaurant that also uses our fuel.
So would you say that the main like motives for them to do it is because like they're gonna throw away it anyway, so like it kind of conveniences them for y'all to just like get rid of it?
It's a really competitive market. A lot of people. There are not many places that are just throwing away the grease. We had one that came on last week that had apparently been doing it for years. It's actually a government agency, but in most cases, it's so competitive. There are about 25 companies competing for the contracts with these restaurants.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that last
There are
thing? I didn't hear
about 25 companies competing in the Austin market for restaurant contracts for the grease.
Wow. Fighting over grease.
We have a large problem with theft, a huge theft problem.
I would have never thought about that. Like,
So what are the other companies that aren't biodiesel companies?
Right.
What do they do with it?
So it falls into this category called yellow grease, which is just a definition of less than 15% free fatty acids and less than 1% water.
Okay.
And so this is a globally traded commodity. Texas is a port state, so a lot of it gets on boats to China. It goes into the cosmetics industry. It goes into animal feed. For the most part, what these companies are doing are just gathering enough oil to sell by typically the commodity pricing is sold by the tanker load, so 7,000 gallons or more. And so it just goes to the highest bidder. And a lot of times that's getting on a boat coming out of Texas. So, like I mentioned, you have to have a rendering license or a hauler's license to provide these services. Then you have this whole other group of like pirates that don't. They just go around and steal oil. And the rendering companies are not supposed to buy it from anyone that doesn't have a license, but there's a lot of shady backdoor stuff.
it's
People
like
are like,
black market kind of thing.
it is. We have containers with locks, like metal containers, busted into and broken into. People will get out there with like like jacks and torches and sawzalls that will cut through metal to get to the grease. It's crazy.
So okay, on the business end, if they don't like pay you to pick up their oil and you don't pay them to use their oil, where is the money being transferred? Like, how are y'all making your money?
The way that we make money, like I mentioned, the tolling model. So, depending on how you look at it, our profits are kind of weighed differently from the oil or biodiesel side. But for instance, if we were in a tolling agreement, that would be a case where we own the oil, we bring it to them, and then we pay them a given amount to make it into biodiesel, and then they would keep Sometimes there's a federal tax credit for biodiesel producers that goes away, comes back, and goes away. And then there's also the secondary market, the RINs. So the producer, we allow to keep those extra credits, and so that balances into the price or whatever. And so it kind of ends up with this equation where it's hard to tell where the value is coming from. But the way that we're doing it today is just selling the grease by the pound to them, and then buying the biodiesel back from them. So we buy the biodiesel. We have different prices for different. It's like we don't make as much money off the retail fuel because we're selling it to someone who's marking it up, and then so I don't know. There's different prices, but when we look at buying the biodiesel, marking it up, and selling it, it only accounts for maybe 20 to 30% of the revenue coming in. Selling the oil to the biodiesel plant is the main source of revenue.
That makes sense.
Okay.
Okay.
So, I mean, really, it's like if we weren't selling them the oil, that money would come from biodiesel sales, that same value, if that makes sense.
Okay.
But just because of how it is, it's weird because it incentivizes us to not focus on getting more biodiesel into the community, and having it, used on farms and having our food system become more sustainable, or these delivery companies, or all these things that we could do to gain kind of environmental, victories.
Yeah.
It takes the focus away from that. Really, if there's more oil that's going to biodiesel, there's more biodiesel out there. So it's kind of good, but it's strange how that incentive thing plays out.
So other than the oil that you're getting from the restaurants and the buildings that actually kind of just change the oil into this biodiesel, do you guys need any other resources? Do you guys have to use any other resources to make the oil or to get the oil, anything along those lines?
Do you mean accounts or like equipment-wise or materials-wise?
All of the above. Just anything that's other than you guys, the restaurants, and the people who are changing it. Like, do you guys need any other people? Or?
We have containers. Do you want to walk over here and look at this container?
Sure.
We just ordered. To like a 55-gallon drum. We now have quarter-inch steel that's drilled out, and so this is so that the restaurant can pour the grease in, but you can't take it out without.
Y'all are still recording, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I turned it off just now.
Okay, I'm gonna turn this off, and then if you don't mind, I'm probably gonna video on my phone what you're explaining. If you just want to like re-explain that really fast.
Okay.
Hang on, let me turn the video on.
Could I take a picture of that?
Sure.
I'm just gonna get. So you're saying that they pour all their oil into there, and then like where do y'all take it out at? Y'all.
We undo this lock, and
Okay.
this whole pin slides out, and then you can lift this up.
Oh, okay.
And then
you
we
have trucks.
have a vacuum truck,
Okay.
and it has like a 4-foot piece of PVC. We call it a stinger.
Yeah.
We drop that in there, open the valve, and it sucks it all into the truck.
It's pretty cool.
So if you want to just kind of re-explain that, sorry. But
Yeah, so these are some new custom containers. So I mentioned we have had a lot of issues with theft of the grease in the past. So we ordered these. The things that we wanted to keep in mind for both for our end and for the restaurant end is that we want it to be ergonomic. We don't want people holding a large container of hot oil to have to fuss with a lock, or some places they would want us to put it in a special room so people could get into it. But it's like we kind of want to get around all these things and make it really simple for someone to deal with this material. And typically it'll be hot when it comes out of the fryer. Sometimes it's 350 degrees. And so to have an all-metal container that's a good ledge, it's at a good height, and they don't have to mess with the lock or anything like that. There's just this lid, and then the drilled out metal in here prevents anyone from getting a hose down in there or being able to take the oil out without a key to the lock. And then they just have to keep it closed so we don't just end up collecting a bunch of rainwater.
That's awesome. Makes sense.
All right. Well, depending on how the audio came out on that one, we might be able to use it. And if not, you got pictures?
Yes,
So,
I got pictures.
Separate one.
This is another company. This is one of our competitors, Metro. This is a gigantic container. This is a 400 gallon container. That's a 134 gallon.
It's 134.
They use a similar thing. They've got actually channels that run down the back, so you couldn't snake a hose through there. So this is the same idea. They're trying to prevent theft as well.
So do they supply to both of you, both companies?
No, this restaurant just opened at this location.
Okay.
The place that was here before used this company, but we've sent them a notice of cancellation or whatever. So they'll be by to pick up their container within 10 business days, or we'll just remove it.
Okay. Awesome.
All right. Well, I think that about covers my questions. Can we get some pictures of y'all like disposing, I guess, sort of the oil?
Yeah, we can talk to the guy.